In the spring of 1962, buried within a classified research facility outside Prague, one invention promised to end the Cold War in weeks. Within 48 hours of its first test, it was banned by every nuclear power on Earth. The inventor vanished without trace. The documentation was incinerated. The facility, erased from maps. But fragments survived in redacted files and whispered testimonies, enough to reconstruct a truth more terrifying than any missile crisis. Humanity's most dangerous weapon wasn't built to destroy cities. It was built to make them disappear. By 1961, the arms race had reached a grim stalemate. Both superpowers possessed enough warheads to annihilate civilization 10 times over, yet neither could guarantee victory without mutual extinction. In darkened Pentagon briefing rooms and Kremlin strategy chambers, the same desperate question echoed. How do you win a war when winning means dying? Every side was searching for a way to achieve dominance without endless bloodshed, or at least without their own bloodshed. Dr. Erik Voller was not who you'd expect to change warfare forever. A Czech-born theoretical physicist, he'd spent the 1950s publishing obscure papers on quantum field resonance and spatial harmonics, work so abstract that even his colleagues dismissed it as mathematical fantasy. He was a pacifist who'd refused lucrative defense contracts. He wrote letters to Einstein about the moral weight of science. He believed knowledge should heal, not harm. That made what happened next all the more tragic. In 1959, facing political pressure and dwindling research funding, Voller accepted a modest grant from a NATO-adjacent technology initiative. The project brief was innocuous: investigate non-kinetic disruption methods for electronic systems. A way to disable enemy communications, perhaps. Nothing more. Within 18 months, he'd stumbled onto something else entirely. He called it the resonance cascade device. In his notes, the few that survived, Voller described it as a tunable field generator capable of inducing sympathetic vibration across quantum probability states. To the military observers who didn't understand a word of it, he explained more simply, it finds the frequency at which matter stops agreeing with itself. It wasn't a bomb. It didn't emit radiation, projectiles, or heat. The prototype was no larger than a filing cabinet, powered by conventional electricity and operated silently. During laboratory trials, it could make a steel cube vanish into fine powder. It could turn water into vapor without heat. It could collapse a concrete wall into constituent atoms, all without touching it. One engineer described watching a test. It didn't explode. It just erased. Like someone had hit delete on reality. The military implications were immediately apparent. This was precision without fallout, devastation without evidence, power without the moral complexity of visible destruction. For a few terrifying weeks in early 1962, it seemed like the perfect weapon. On March 14, 1962, in a remote valley in the Ore Mountains along the Czech-German border, they activated the full-scale prototype for the first time. The target, an abandoned village, 3 decommissioned tanks and sensor equipment spread across 2 kilometers. At 0600 hours, under gray skies and in absolute secrecy, Dr. Voller threw the switch. Witnesses reported no sound. No light. No shockwave. Just sudden, impossible emptiness. Birds flying overhead dropped from the sky mid-flight. The tanks didn't explode, they crumpled inward like crushed paper, then dissolved into rust-colored dust. Buildings stood intact for 3 seconds, then collapsed into themselves, leaving only foundation outlines and silence. The entire process took 11 seconds. Then came the silence. Not quiet, silence. As if sound itself had been removed from the valley. Radio equipment went dead. Compasses spun uselessly. For 6 hours, no electronic device functioned within 5 kilometers of the test site. The scientists were horrified. 3 of them resigned immediately. One later told a journalist, before disappearing into protective custody, "We'd opened a door that should have stayed sealed." Erik knew it. We all knew it. The military was ecstatic. Plans were drafted immediately. Surgical strikes. Decapitation scenarios. Imagine eliminating an enemy capital without fallout, without civilian casualties visible from satellites, without international condemnation. For a few minutes, one NATO observer wrote in a since-destroyed memo, "We thought we had achieved the impossible, a clean war." Then people started dying. Within days, the observation team reported symptoms. Nosebleeds, disorientation, cellular degradation resembling radiation sickness but without radiation. 7 personnel were hospitalized. 2 died within a week. Autopsies revealed something unprecedented. Their cellular structure had begun to decohere, as if the fundamental forces holding their atoms together had weakened. But the horror went deeper. Electronic equipment that had been near the test site, even if powered off, began malfunctioning weeks later, miles away. Film from cameras that had recorded the test showed strange artifacts. Missing frames, temporal loops, images of things that hadn't been there. One photograph showed the valley before the test, but with the ruins already present. Reality itself seemed scarred. Despite classification protocols, word spread through intelligence networks like a virus. The Soviets knew within a week. Chinese intelligence within 2. British MI6 had partial schematics within 3. A secret arms race began, not to build more but to understand what had been built. Both sides quietly began their own testing programs, each terrified the other would perfect it first. On April 3, 1962, a Soviet research installation near Chelyabinsk attempted to replicate Voller's design. Something went catastrophically wrong. The installation wasn't just destroyed, it ceased to exist in coherent records. Satellite reconnaissance showed a geometric void, a perfect square of emptiness 7 kilometers across. No rubble. No crater. Just blank earth as if the facility had never been built. More disturbing, interviews with nearby villagers produced no memories of the installation. Maps from before the incident showed forests where the base should have been. Even Soviet records became contradictory. Some files referenced the installation, others showed it never existed. One American analyst reviewing the intelligence wrote simply, "We've created a weapon that attacks history itself." Within 72 hours of the Chelyabinsk incident, an unprecedented communication occurred. The hotline between Washington and Moscow, installed after the Cuban Missile Crisis to prevent nuclear war, crackled to life with a message that would never appear in any historical record. For the first time, enemies found common ground: fear. NATO and Warsaw Pact representatives met in a neutral location. The specifics remain classified. The meeting lasted 14 hours. No translators were allowed. No records were kept. The result was unanimous. Project Null, as it came to be internally designated, was classified as an existential technology. All research would be terminated. All documentation destroyed. All personnel debriefed and bound by secrecy protocols that superseded national loyalty. More than a ban, this was an act of collective survival. The same nations that held each other at nuclear gunpoint agreed on one principle. Some weapons are too dangerous for anyone to possess, even themselves. It remains the only arms control agreement never publicly acknowledged. Dr. Erik Voller was not present at the final test. He'd watched the Valley demonstration, seen the aftereffects, reviewed the casualty reports. According to colleagues, he stopped sleeping. Stopped speaking. He filled notebooks with equations attempting to reverse the resonance, to undo what had been done. When informed of the international ban, he reportedly said only, "It's not enough. The knowledge exists. It will be rediscovered." He refused to destroy his research. The core mathematics, he argued, were fundamental physics. You couldn't ban understanding itself. On the night of May 12, 1962, security personnel conducting routine checks found his laboratory empty. His personal effects remained. His notes were gone. The prototype device showed signs of having been activated one final time. At minimum power, duration 30 seconds, target radius 1 meter. Dr. Erik Voller was never seen again. No body was found. No disappearance was officially reported. The prevailing theory among the few who know the story, he used the device on himself. Not as suicide, as erasure. A final act of responsibility, taking the knowledge with him into non-existence. He became what he'd created, a hole in the world where something used to be. Officially, no such weapon exists. No Project Null. No Dr. Voller. No incident in the Ore Mountains. The facility was demolished in 1964, the land reforested. The valley now a protected nature reserve where electronic devices still occasionally malfunction without explanation. Unofficially, fragments persist. Redacted intelligence files surface on dark web forums. Physics papers by Voller are still cited, though always with footnotes. Authors' later work classification unknown. In certain circles of theoretical physics, there are equations that end with a warning: do not pursue practical application. Some believe a new generation is trying to rebuild it, always with good intentions, always in the name of peace, always certain they can control what Voller could not. Every few years, an unexplained disappearance of a research facility occurs. A laboratory erased from records. A military installation that satellites suddenly cannot corroborate. Each time, the incident is explained away as administrative error, map discrepancy, disinformation. Each time, a few people who remember exchange knowing glances and say nothing. Technology doesn't decide how it's used. People do. But sometimes, the only way to save humanity is to bury its own genius, to collectively agree that certain knowledge, once discovered, must be forgotten. Dr. Voller understood this too late. He created a weapon so effective that its greatest danger wasn't what it could destroy, but what it revealed about us. That given the choice between power and survival, between victory and wisdom, between knowing and safety, we will always choose to know. The question that haunts those few who remember Project Null is not whether such weapons will be reinvented. History suggests they will. The question is simpler and more personal. If you created something that could erase the world, and erasing it meant erasing yourself, would you have the courage to pull the switch? Dr. Erik Voller answered that question in the only way that mattered. The valley in the Ore Mountains remembers nothing. And that, perhaps, was the point.